Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm an airline pilot, and this weekend is update weekend. A lot of our favorite airliner developers have released updates for Microsoft Flight Simulator aircraft or for in-development aircraft throughout the course of the last week. And today I want to do a brief summary of what has been released and what kind of news there are. Now, you guys can already see a 777 on the screen, and you know that means the 777 is number one in this list. And indeed, PMDG have released an update for the 777 on the 3rd of September, which is available to you guys via the Operations Center. Now, that update has been focused on making changes to the LOD system since MSFS 2024 has been changed with Sim Update 3, which caused a couple of problems with the 777s that have been fixed with this update, so that the airplane now shows correctly again. Now, there is a little bit of a divergence with the build numbers of the airplane, as they are not updating 777s that don't need updating. So therefore, while you are used to seeing the same version number from PMDG for all different aircraft throughout the time, that had to be changed this time because, well, if it's not broken, then don't fix it. In general, the doors 3 left and right on the 777s have been changed and updated. An LOD issue with the air conditioning unit and the 777-300ER floor panels has been fixed. Floating window frames have been updated. The 777 had some problems in virtual reality at FS 2024, which have been fixed as well. And the fan blades have been improved with DLSS. And finally, the evacuation press to test switch wasn't animated before, is animated now. Now that's the PMDG 777 update that's just been released. They've also released some news on aircraft updates as well, in terms of what you guys can expect on Marketplace and with a sound update. So starting with Marketplace, there still are a couple of ongoing issues for FS 2024 with texture corruption that can happen when the airplane gets encrypted through the intake process. Now that is still not fully investigated, and PMDG are in contact with Asobo to get that fixed in order to get you guys the latest updates for Marketplace customers as well. The 777-200LR is currently on hold for the intake process because of the aforementioned corruption issues, but they are going to push it to the intake process very, very soon. And when they posted the update last week, they said it's going to be before the weekend, but we don't have any newer update if that's happened yet. Now, let's talk about the 777 sound updates, which you guys are waiting for quite a while now. And indeed, it's taken longer than originally projected, but PMDG expects that they are close to an initial release of the new sound environment for the 777-300ER, 200LR, and Freighter in the coming weeks. Note that the 200ER is not mentioned in there, and I can only personally guess why that is, but the obvious answer would be that there are 3 different engine types, while the other ones basically share a variation of the GE90. So therefore, I could imagine that it is a little bit more worked for the 200ER. Now, next let's talk about the 737NG. And PMDG has reported that the 737-800 is nearly finished with the native product conversion for Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024. And they are planning to hand that one into testing, well, this week. So hopefully we are going to be able to see that airplane on this channel and obviously on your computers very, very soon. Now, a couple of changes have also been done for that expected update, in that you are finally able to open the cockpit windows and the doors. Now, that's pretty much everything for PMDG over here, so let's move on to the next aircraft, which is the iniBuilds Airbus A350. Let's actually just start with this absolutely beautiful image that we've got from iniBuilds in their forums. And I tell you honestly, if you open that one on a mobile phone or something, I personally wasn't able to distinguish this flight sim image from the real world. Now, if you view it on a 4K monitor, then yeah, this guy kind of gives it away. but the rest of it just looks absolutely awesome. Now, the A350 has also seen an update where a lot of these smaller things have been fixed that were still open beforehand. So stuff like some minor autopilot behaviors, performance predictions, TCARs, some heads-up display stuff and eCam display related stuff, and most importantly, another batch of WASM crashes has been fixed with this update. Now, especially in terms of WASM crashes, if you guys experience any, be sure to report them to iniBuilds, either in support tickets or through their other support means. Personally, I'm always a fan of the tickets because you're in direct contact with the developers or with the trained support staff over there. Now, WASM crashes, very hard to track down by developers because they basically just come up while you fly. So if you guys encounter any, be sure to report them directly to iniBuilds so that they can be worked on for future updates. Now, next up, let's talk about the Airbus A340, where a lot of news has been posted as well. I'm going to link the original thread in the video description below so that you guys can look at it in the iniBuild forums. But for the time being, let's just focus on a couple of displays that I just find really need to look at. We're going to start with this one over here that's been posted on the iniBuilds forums, and you guys can get a very good impression of the EIS-1 cockpit that they are modeling for the A340 on top of the EIS-2. Now, for those of you who are not aware, EIS-1 is Electronic Instrument System version number 1, which in terms of what you can see as a flight simmer, mostly encompasses the CRT displays that were built into those aircraft back in the 1990s and very early 2000s, before they've been switched to LCDs. Now, the CRTs have a lot lower resolution, and they also have some different display characteristics, some of which I want to talk about in today's video. The first thing you can see here is the train display, which is quite different. So on the EIS-2 you always have that indication down here. On the EIS-1 it's much larger and seen on the top over here. Also, the way how those terrain returns actually display, I'm always kind of hanging a little bit on that one because I don't want to call it terrain radar because it really isn't a radar. It's an electronic database that you guys see on the screens, but that's for another video. So let's have a look at an example of that over here. You guys can see how, first of all, there are really some, let's call it imperfections to the way how the numbers are displayed over here. Just look at the top of the number 8, which is really noticeable, but also the bottom down there. And you can see the same kind of artifacts on the other numbers as well, which is exactly what these things looked like back in the day, and therefore a very welcome thing to see on the aircraft. You can also see how the actual terrain itself, let's call it the terrain propagation on the display, is somewhat different to a modern eGPWS and is kind of adapted to what a CRT display can actually show. Now, something else that we should be talking about when talking about the A350 updates is the flight dynamics and a little sneak peek that we've got at them. So when we are looking at this display over here, you can first of all see that they've done a wonderful job modeling the visuals. But hey, it's iniBuilds, they always do that, so we're used to that. But what you can really see on this one is what you get when you're in flat configuration 1. Note that I'm talking about 1, not 1 plus F. And then flying down at the S speed. And you can see the aircraft's pitch is actually close to 7.5 degrees. It's around about 7 degrees in this screenshot. And that is how an Airbus in configuration 1 actually flies. Because what config 1 basically does is to extend only the slats, which increase your critical angle of attack, but they don't really increase the actual lift in that you could lower the pitch to maintain your current flight path. That's what the flaps do. The slats, since they only increase the critical angle of attack, and that's of course a very simplistic explanation here, but I want to make it understandable for the broad majority of people. therefore the airplane really gets a very high pitch when you're flying down at the S-speed and maintaining your altitude. And it's very nice to see that iniBuilds have been able to capture this for the A340, because I know from a couple developers that the default flight model in MSFS doesn't really support that difference between the slats and the flaps. So it's very nice to see that they found a trick to simulate this. Now, apart from that, you can really just see how cool the cockpit looks in this picture, can you? Now, there's a lot of other stuff, especially some visual stuff inside this update as well, and you can kind of see that it's this huge update. So yeah, just go ahead and read it yourself. It's really worth it, in my opinion. Also watching those videos in there. So absolutely go ahead and give that one a look. Now, let's go ahead and move over to the next lovely update that we've gotten this week, and that is obviously the Fenix Airbus A320 family, which has seen the patch 2 to the big effing update. Big Fenix update, I mean. Now, this one has a couple of small things that I do really appreciate, but it has one big thing that I appreciate even more, and that is the auto thrust behavior that's been worked on. Now, a lot of flight sim auto thrusts work the way that they simply chase the speed bug. So the moment you get a little bit too slow, they increase thrust. The moment you get a little bit too fast, they decrease thrust. And that way they're basically chasing the speed target. A real-world auto thrust doesn't do that. What a real-world auto thrust does is to accept a certain deviation above and below the target speed before it actually changes thrust aggressively. Now, on Boeing aircraft, this is particularly visible, as you can see in the PMDG 737, for example. As far as I know, PMDG is the only other developer to actually simulate this behavior. Now, Fenix has been added to the list here. Now, in Boeing aircraft, it's especially visible. In Airbus aircraft, they just slow the rate of response of the engines, and sometimes it doesn't respond at all if you've just got a minor variation from your target thrust. Now, what this does and why airplane developers actually do this in first place is that they minimize the temperature variations inside the engines. Remember, for any increase in thrust, your engines are going to get hotter. Any decrease in thrust, they're going to get colder. Now, if you know what happens to metal when you continuously change its temperatures, at some point it's just going to break. And for this reason, airplane developers do accept a little bit of deviation from the target speeds and instead just do small changes rather than large ones. What's particularly interesting and noteworthy here is that in managed mode, Airbus accepts more deviation than it does in selected mode. Basically, when you're flying selected, it tries to fly the speed really accurately. So the engines are going to respond quicker. When you fly managed, they are going to respond a little bit slower. So that change is now simulated, and that overall auto thrust behavior is now simulated. Now, as a funny side note, due to this change in the engine reaction, or rather the auto thrust reaction to speed variation, it's actually more economic to fly the same speed in managed mode than it is to fly the same speed in selected mode. We're talking about some 40 or 50 kilograms of fuel usage difference between doing an entire flight managed versus an entire flight with exactly the same target speed selected. And, well, that's now simulated by Fenix. Apart from that, there are also a couple of other changes done, for example, to the fly-by-wire system and the roll model, and a couple other things as well. So do go ahead and check out the full changelog, which, again, I'm going to link in the video description below. Apart from that, we've also recently seen the release of the Black Square TBM A350 for Flight Simulator 2024, which I can't wait to try out, as it's been one of my favorite Black Square aircraft back in the days of MSFS 2020. And we've also recently seen an update to the Just Flight Avril RJs, adding the freighter and a lot of changes to the systems as well. So now it's up to you guys to tell me which one you want me to fly first on my next couple of videos, so that I can kind of build a sequence in which to show you all the new updates in action. The choice is between the 777s, the A350, the A320, and of course the Avro RJ and the TBM 850. Let me know your preferred sequence in the comments underneath the video, and let me know if you've already tried any of those updates that have recently been released and what you think of them. Thank you very much for watching. As always, be sure to like, comment and subscribe, and if you really love what I'm doing on this channel, I would appreciate a small donation through the Buy Me Coffee link in the video description below. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to see you all again on the next one.